When I planned my quiet weekend retreat at the lake cabin, my one place untouched by HOA nonsense, gossip, or the constant parade of self-appointed neighborhood sheriffs, I never imagined that the peace of the woods would be shattered by the one person I always pray never to encounter outside civilization, a full-powered, clipboard-carrying HOA Karen with a badge-sized ego and a legally questionable sense of authority. The cabin wasn't even in her jurisdiction. It was an hour outside town, nestled between towering pines, a stretch of calm water, and absolute silence interrupted only by the occasional loon call. But somehow, impossibly, she showed up anyway, marching through the trees like she had a warrant signed by the president himself. She had been pestering me for weeks back home, repeatedly claiming I had unauthorized shrubbery height deviation and non-HOA compliant recycling bin positioning. But today, at my remote lake cabin, she escalated from annoying to unhinged. I had arrived early that morning because I was expecting someone important, extremely important. The state attorney general had arranged a private meeting with me regarding a developing legal case involving shady HOA overreach across the region, and my experiences had become a crucial piece of evidence. He wanted a quiet place, away from reporters, HOA insiders, and political operatives who had been trying to sabotage the investigation. My cabin was perfect. I spent the early hours gathering documents, evidence files, copies of fines I never owed, recordings of threats Karen or her board had left on my voicemails, and a detailed journal I had kept documenting the harassment. Little did I know, Karen had followed me or maybe tracked me using some bizarre HOA spy technique, and convinced herself I was hiding illegal landscaping equipment in my property up here. The sun was barely beginning its afternoon descent when the event unfolded that would later become the talk of the county. Inside the cabin, the Attorney General sat at my rustic wooden table, reviewing my evidence binder with growing concern while sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He had just asked me to walk him through the timeline of my most recent HOA conflict when the first sharp crack echoed across the porch like a shotgun blast. The Attorney General looked up sharply. Another crack followed, splinters scattered from the doorframe, and I realized with horror that someone was trying to break into my cabin. We exchanged a stunned look, and he quietly set his mug down, straightened his suit, and instinctively shifted into that calm, commanding demeanor of a man accustomed to legal chaos, but perhaps not violent home invasions. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked calmly. Before I could answer, the door burst open, slamming against the wall so hard the entire cabin shook. And there she stood, panting, furious, her HOA badge lanyard hanging crookedly around her neck like some kind of twisted sheriff star. Karen had busted into my lake cabin with the force of someone who believed she'd just cornered a criminal mastermind. Her eyes scanned the room like a malfunctioning security camera, landing on the Attorney General and completely failing to recognize him. She jutted her chin out dramatically and said, "Uh-huh. I knew you were hiding something illegal on this property." The Attorney General blinked and tilted his head, almost amused, before calmly asking, "And who might you be?" She stormed inside further, ignoring the question entirely, launching into a breathless rant about unauthorized lake occupancy, suspicious weekend activity, and failure to provide HOA access to remote properties under the Emergency Compliance Clause. There was, of course, no such clause. Not here, not back home, not anywhere on earth except apparently in the imaginary HOA constitution she carried around in her mind like a sacred text. I should have spoken. I should have stopped her. But honestly, I was frozen between shock and disbelief as I watched her escalate at speed. She dramatically pointed at the Attorney General as if she had just uncovered a cartel leader. "You," she snapped, "identify yourself. And don't even think about lying. I will file a citation." He looked at me, eyebrows raised, then calmly pulled out his identification wallet. "Ma'am," he said with a measured politeness I could never achieve under such absurd pressure, "I am the State Attorney General." Karen snatched the ID from his hand, absolutely snatched it like she was TSA security, and inspected it with a squint so intense you'd think she was analyzing ancient hieroglyphics. Then she scoffed. "This is fake," she declared confidently. "A cabin in the woods is not an appropriate setting for any official meeting. I'm placing both of you under HOA investigative detainment until board members can arrive, the Attorney General and I exchanged a slow, mutual blink, perhaps the most bewildered blink in human history. He leaned back slightly and asked, "Detainment? Under what authority?" She crossed her arms proudly. Homeowners Association Code 1-4B, suspicious behavior outside designated residential boundaries. We're not in an HOA, I finally managed to say. She waved a dismissive hand in my direction. All properties fall under general HOA oversight when violations are suspected. No, the Attorney General said bluntly, they do not, but Karen had already moved on, pacing around my cabin, inspecting things, picking up evidence folders that contained information about her own misconduct, and lecturing us both on the importance of adherence to neighborhood morality. She didn't even realize she was walking directly into the epicenter of a statewide investigation into HOA abuses, a case that her behavior was now actively helping prove. Her rant only grew more absurd. She tried to confiscate the Attorney General's briefcase. She tried to fine me for having unsanctioned rustic decor.
At one point, she attempted to unplug my coffee maker because she believed the electrical setup was a fire hazard that could reflect poorly on HOA insurance rates, despite the fact this house wasn't in her HOA, county, or even relevant jurisdiction. Finally, the Attorney General stood. Slow, calm, controlled. "Ma'am," he said, "you have forcibly entered private property, interfered with an ongoing state investigation, unlawfully seized confidential materials, and attempted to detain a government official. I need you to sit down." "I will absolutely not," she snapped. And that's when fate delivered the moment that would later be written into legal memos, newspaper headlines, and possibly comedy skits for decades to come. Karen attempted to citizen arrest the Attorney General. She reached for his arm with the confidence of someone who believed deeply, perhaps religiously, in her own non-existent authority. He stepped back. She stumbled, knocked over my lamp, tried again. And that's when 3 state investigators, who had been scheduled to arrive shortly after our meeting began, stepped through the still broken front door. They froze, looked at the scene, looked at Karen attempting to restrain the Attorney General, and one of them finally said, "Sir, do you want us to take her in?" Karen whirled around, ready to unleash wrath upon the newcomers until she saw their badges. Real ones. Government issued. Her face shifted from outrage to confusion to a dawning, creeping horror the moment she truly realized what she had done. The Attorney General sighed. "Yes," he said. "I think that's appropriate," she sputtered, protested, insisted the entire world was misunderstanding her brave act of community protection. She claimed she was conducting our citizen compliance inspection. She tried to assert HOA supremacy over state law. She even attempted to fine the investigators for improper uniform presentation. And as they led her out, ranting into the forest, the Attorney General looked around at the wrecked cabin, the broken door, the spilled documents, and then at me with a small exhausted smile. "Well," he said, adjusting his tie, "that certainly strengthens the case, and he wasn't wrong." That incident became the cornerstone of the biggest HOA abuse lawsuit in state history. Karen's board dissolved. Mandatory oversight committees were established statewide. My cabin door was repaired at government expense. And Karen, well, rumor has it she's still arguing with park rangers about whether the trees comply with HOA-approved growth patterns. And I still can't believe that of all the things that could have interrupted my private meeting with the Attorney General, it was the HOA Karen who followed me to the woods and broke into my lake cabin. But in a weird way, her outrageous arrival was the best thing that could happen because she exposed the truth better than any evidence folder ever could. In the days that followed Karen's spectacular meltdown at my lake cabin, the entire situation escalated far beyond anything I thought possible, transforming from a bizarre personal incident into a full-blown statewide legal storm.
The Attorney General stayed for another hour after her arrest, calmly piecing together the wreckage she'd left behind, examining every document she had touched, and shaking his head with increasing disbelief at the sheer audacity embedded in her behavior. As he flicked through my journal, each entry documenting a different HOA violation she had invented, misinterpreted, or outright fabricated, he kept remarking that this wasn't just overreach anymore. It was a pathological obsession with control, a behavior pattern he suspected might be rooted deeply within the HOA board itself. But the true chaos began when the investigators escorted Karen back to town. Somehow, even in handcuffs, she managed to whip her followers the most extreme HOA loyalists into a frenzy. Phone calls exploded across the community.